Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly thought about yourself? Not in a selfish way, not in a me-first kind of way, but in a deeply honest, reflective, intentional way. Most of us are taught from an early age to think about others. We're told to fit in, to follow, to serve. And while there is beauty in service, there is also a trap in forgetting who we are in the process. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot lead others if you cannot lead yourself. You cannot inspire others to be their best if you are hiding from your own truth. Thinking about yourself always means checking in with your values. It means asking, what do I want? What makes me come alive? What am I tolerating that I shouldn't be? It's not about arrogance. It's about alignment. Because the people who make the biggest difference in the world are those who are rooted in who they are. They know their why. They live with purpose. And they don't seek validation from the outside. They carry conviction from the inside. So if you feel lost, overwhelmed, or unsure, stop chasing approval. Stop trying to be what everyone else needs you to be. Start being you. Start thinking about yourself. Always ask yourself today, what am I doing because I think I should? And what would I do if I actually gave myself permission to be honest? Thinking about yourself always is not the enemy of contribution. It's the beginning of it. When you honor yourself, you give others permission to do the same. So don't apologize for thinking about yourself. Do it with clarity. Do it with courage. And most of all, do it because your best self is the most powerful gift you can give the world. We often confuse self-reflection with selfishness. Society tells us that putting ourselves first is wrong, that we must constantly serve, give, and care for others before we think about our own needs. But there's a fundamental misunderstanding here, and it costs people their peace, their purpose, and ultimately their potential. Self-reflection is not about putting yourself above others. It's about putting yourself in alignment with yourself. It's the process of getting honest. It's about pausing long enough to ask, am I okay with where I'm going? Do I even know why I'm doing what I'm doing? Do I recognize myself in the life I'm living? Most people spend their lives moving forward faster and faster, trying to meet expectations that were never theirs to begin with. They chase careers because someone told them that's what success looks like. They stay in relationships because it's convenient or because they're afraid of disappointing others. They build lives around what they think they should be doing, rarely stopping to ask what they want to be doing. Self-reflection interrupts that autopilot. It forces you to slow down and pay attention to your internal signals. The subtle discomfort, the quiet dissatisfaction, the gut feeling that something isn't right. These are not inconveniences. They're guidance. But if we never make space to reflect, we miss them. And when we miss them, we end up disconnected from ourselves, showing up in the world inauthentically, exhausted from the act of pretending. There's nothing selfish about wanting to understand yourself. In fact, it's one of the most generous things you can do. Why? Because clarity breeds confidence, and confidence creates stability. A person who is clear about who they are does not need to dominate others, does not need to manipulate to feel safe, and does not crumble when life gets uncertain. They respond with purpose, not panic. They act with intention, not reaction. And when you know yourself deeply, you stop projecting your insecurities onto others. You stop needing other people to behave a certain way in order for you to feel okay. That makes you a better friend, partner, leader, and human being. It makes you trustworthy, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. People feel safe around those who are rooted in self-awareness. That kind of presence is rare and powerful. Think about this. How can you ask others to trust you if you don't even trust yourself? How can you give meaningful advice if you haven't taken time to understand your own path? How can you lead a team, a family, a community, if you've never led yourself through your own doubts, fears, and contradictions? This is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about showing up in the world with your eyes open, not just looking outward, but inward too. The more you know about yourself, your habits, your triggers, your strengths, your blind spots, the more equipped you are to grow, connect, and contribute. Self-reflection is the foundation of all transformation. Without it, any success you build will be shaky. Any peace you find will be temporary. Any progress you make will feel hollow. But with it, you build something unshakable, a life that reflects who you really are. So no, it's not selfish to think about yourself. It's responsible, it's courageous, and it's necessary. Because you cannot live a meaningful life on accident. You must choose it. And that choice starts the moment you turn your attention inward and decide to listen to your own voice, clearly, bravely, and without apology. We live in a culture that celebrates giving. Giving your time, your energy, your support, your attention. We're told to be there for others, to show up, to contribute, to serve. And yes, giving is beautiful, it's necessary, it's human. But here's the truth most people forget. You can't give what you don't have. Imagine someone trying to pour water from an empty glass. No matter how much they want to help, they simply can't, because there's nothing inside. That's what happens when we constantly try to give to others without first taking care of ourselves. We end up drained, frustrated, even resentful. Not because we're bad people, but because we've been giving from a place of emptiness for too long. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being sustainable. You cannot support others effectively if you are constantly sacrificing your well-being in the process. There is a difference between sacrifice and self-neglect. One is noble, the other is destructive. We've been conditioned to believe that rest is laziness, that boundaries are rude, that saying no is cold. But that mindset leads people to burnout. It leads them to live half-present lives, smiling on the outside, falling apart on the inside. You see it in leaders who preach strength but secretly feel weak, in parents who love their children but feel depleted, in friends who are always available yet quietly wish someone would ask how they're doing. Giving from abundance feels different than giving from depletion. When you're filled up emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you give with energy, joy, and patience. But when you're running on empty, your giving becomes a performance. It's forced. It's driven by guilt or obligation, not genuine connection. If you truly want to be there for others, start by being there for yourself. Fill your own cup first. That might mean creating time to rest, to reflect, to grow. It might mean healing from things you've ignored for too long. It might mean saying, not right now, so you can show up more fully later. These are not excuses. They are necessary acts of responsibility. The people around you don't just need your help. They need your wholeness. They need the version of you that is clear, stable, and self-aware, because that version listens more deeply, thinks more clearly, responds more wisely. You can only offer those things when you've cultivated them within yourself first. Think about the airplane safety instruction. Put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. Why? Because you're no help to anyone if you pass out trying to save them. Life works the same way. You can't lift someone up if you're constantly collapsing under your own weight. Taking care of yourself is not an act of selfishness, it's preparation for impact. And here's something else. When you model self-care, self-awareness, and emotional maturity, you give others permission to do the same. You teach by example. You show people that strength isn't about never needing anything. It's about knowing your limits and respecting them. That's real strength. That's leadership. So if you're someone who's always showing up for others, ask yourself honestly, am I also showing up for me? Do I have the patience, the energy, the clarity I'm trying to give away, or am I trying to give from an empty place? The most generous thing you can do for the people you care about is to make sure you're full of clarity, full of love, full of peace. Because that's when your presence becomes powerful. Not because you're trying to be everything to everyone, but because you're standing on something solid. You can't give what you don't have. So start with you, fill up, then give freely. From the overflow, purpose is something many people search for, often looking outward, toward jobs, relationships, status, or recognition. But real purpose doesn't begin out there. It begins with you. It begins within. Purpose is not something you stumble upon by accident. It's not a prize handed out for working hard or being lucky. It's a process of uncovering, not acquiring. It's already inside you, but it requires awareness, courage, and honesty to bring it to the surface. And that process always starts with a question: who am I really? Too many people try to live meaningful lives while skipping this step. They chase goals, climb ladders, and pursue success without ever understanding what truly matters to them. They do what looks good, what earns praise, or what fits the mold, but deep down, something feels off. And that feeling, that quiet sense of disconnection, it's your inner self reminding you that purpose can't be borrowed. It must be owned. Purpose isn't just about what you do. It's about why you do it. And your why isn't going to come from anyone else. It won't come from your parents, your boss, or your social feed. It will come from your experiences, your values, your pain, your joy, from the moments that shaped you, the truths you've discovered, and the vision that pulls you forward even when it's hard. That's why purpose must begin with you. Because no one else has lived your story, no one else has your lens, and no one else can define your path with the clarity that comes from within. When you try to build a life based on someone else's idea of purpose, it feels heavy, it takes more effort, you feel like you're constantly pushing against resistance. But when your actions are aligned with your true purpose, something shifts, the work becomes lighter. The obstacles don't go away, but you move through them with a different kind of energy. There's a sense of direction, even when things are unclear. Living with purpose doesn't mean having all the answers, it means being anchored, even when the world is chaotic. It means making choices not just based on outcomes, but based on alignment. Alignment with your core beliefs, your long-term vision, and your deepest truth. Purpose is also not static. It evolves as you evolve, but you'll never be able to follow its path if you never learn to listen to yourself. That's why developing self-awareness is so essential. The more you understand what drives you, what moves you, and what drains you, the more clearly you can navigate toward the life you're meant to lead. And let's be clear, a purpose-driven life is not always comfortable. In fact, it often requires sacrifice, discipline, and letting go of things that once felt safe. But what it gives back is far greater. Fulfillment, meaning, and the peace that comes from knowing you're walking in integrity with yourself. If you've been feeling lost, maybe it's not because you don't have a purpose. Maybe it's because you haven't taken the time to connect with it. Maybe you've been so busy looking outside for answers that you've forgotten the most important conversation is the one you have with yourself. Purpose begins with you, not with what the world expects, but with what your soul whispers when everything else is quiet. That whisper is your guide. Follow it, trust it, build from it, because when your life is aligned with your purpose, you don't just survive, you lead, you inspire, and you truly live. We live in a world that constantly pulls our attention outward. We're flooded with opinions, comparisons, expectations, and noise. From social media to family dynamics, career, pressure to cultural standards, we're often taught to shape ourselves based on what others see, expect, or approve of. But living that way leads to a hollow existence. One that looks good on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. To live a meaningful life, you must live from the inside out. That means starting with who you are, not who people want you to be. It means making decisions that align with your values, not just your image. It means letting your identity shape your path, not letting your path define your identity. When you live from the outside in, your sense of self becomes dependent on things you can't control, how people react, what society rewards, what others think. You chase success that doesn't satisfy, you follow trends that don't fit, you measure your worth by metrics that have nothing to do with your soul. But when you live from the inside out, everything changes. You stop asking, will people like me if I do this? And start asking, will I respect myself if I do this? You stop performing for applause and start acting out of purpose. You stop bending to fit the mold and start shaping your life around your truth. This isn't always easy. It requires courage, because being yourself in a world that constantly pressures you to be someone else is a radical act. But it's the only way to live in integrity. Living from the inside out doesn't mean ignoring feedback or isolating yourself. It means anchoring your choices in something deeper than approval. It means checking in with yourself before checking in with the crowd. It's about clarity, not rebellion. Honesty, not ego. When you live from your inner values, your outer life begins to reflect something real. That authenticity is magnetic. People are drawn to those who know who they are. Not because they're perfect, but because they're consistent, grounded, and real. Think of a tree. Its strength doesn't come from the leaves or branches. It comes from the roots, the part no one sees. That's where stability lives. And that's how people are too. The stronger your inner foundation, the less you're shaken by external chaos. This doesn't mean life becomes easy or predictable. It means that no matter what happens around you, you have something unshakable within you. That's power. That's peace. That's resilience. So how do you begin to live from the inside out? You get quiet. You listen. You pay attention to what feels true, even if it's inconvenient. You ask better questions. What am I doing just to be accepted? What would I choose if I wasn't afraid of judgment? What matters to me? Not just today, but long term. You stop running from yourself and start building a relationship with yourself. Because the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one between you and your own truth. And here's the paradox. The more you live from the inside out, the more value you bring to the outside world. You become a source of clarity in a confused culture, a voice of calm in a noisy space, a person of purpose in a world of performance. The world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs more people who show up fully, rooted in who they are, living from the inside out. Because only then can you lead, only then can you love deeply, work meaningfully, and live fully. Clarity is one of the most powerful forces in life. It's what helps us make decisions, take action, and live with intention. But clarity doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's not something we stumble upon by chance. It's something we earn. And the price is honesty. You can't be clear about your life, your purpose, or your direction if you're not being honest with yourself. And that's where most people get stuck. Not because they don't want clarity, but because they're afraid of what the truth might reveal. It's easier in the short term to pretend everything's fine, to convince yourself you're happy when you're not, to stay in situations that feel familiar but no longer feel right. But pretending comes at a cost. The longer you avoid the truth, the more disconnected you become. from yourself, from others, and from the life you were meant to live. You start to drift. You feel uncertain, anxious, and unsettled, not because you're lost, but because you've stopped listening to what's real. Honesty is the mirror that shows us where we are, not where we wish we were. It's the hard conversation with yourself that says, this job isn't fulfilling, or this relationship isn't healthy, or I've been settling for less than I deserve. These moments are uncomfortable, but they are necessary, because without that honesty, there is no clarity, just confusion covered up by distraction. The reason honesty is difficult is because it often demands change. When you admit something isn't working, you open the door to decisions you may not feel ready to make. But that's where growth begins, in the space between truth and transformation. Clarity is not about knowing all the answers. It's about being real enough to face the right questions. What do I really want? What am I afraid to admit? Where am I holding on to something I should let go of? These questions are not easy, but they are freeing, because once you stop lying to yourself, you stop living for the wrong reasons. You stop chasing approval, you stop playing roles, and you begin to build a life that's truly your own. It's important to understand that clarity doesn't always feel good at first. Sometimes it brings grief, the grief of realizing something isn't what you hoped. Sometimes it brings guilt for staying too long or not acting sooner. But clarity also brings power. It gives you a foundation to stand on. It replaces doubt with direction. It turns emotional fog into forward motion. And here's the beautiful part. The more honest you become with yourself, the more at peace you feel. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is hidden. You know where you stand. You know what matters. You know what you need to do next, even if it's difficult. Clarity is not about control. It's about alignment. When you're clear, your energy is focused. Your decisions are intentional. Your actions are connected to your values. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop drifting and start designing your life. The truth might shake you, but it won't break you. In fact, it's the only thing strong enough to build a life that lasts. So be honest, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Because clarity doesn't come from certainty. It comes from the courage to be real. If you want a life that feels right on the inside, not just one that looks right on the outside, start telling yourself the truth. That's where clarity begins. And once you have that, you can build anything. There's something deeply powerful about showing up as your best self. Not a perfect version, not someone else's version, but the most honest, intentional, and grounded version of you. It's easy to think that the best gift you can offer others is your time, your help, or your resources. But in reality, the greatest gift you'll ever give to the people around you is you at your best. When you bring your best self into the room, into your relationships, your work, your community, everything around you is elevated. You communicate with clarity, you listen with presence, you lead with compassion, and you act with purpose. You create trust, not just through your words, but through your energy. People feel the difference when you're aligned, when you're not hiding, performing, or pretending. They feel safe, they feel seen. That kind of presence changes things. But becoming your best self isn't about trying harder or doing more. It's not about hustle, perfectionism, or impressing others. It's about becoming deeply connected to who you are, what you stand for, and how you choose to live. It requires intentional effort, yes, but it's more about removing what doesn't belong than adding what does. It's about letting go of the fear, comparison, guilt, and self-doubt that keep you small. It's about peeling back the layers so you can lead with authenticity. Too often, people believe they have to sacrifice themselves to serve others. They believe that being tired, overwhelmed, or stretched thin is a sign of love or strength. But how helpful can you really be if you're constantly exhausted, anxious, or disconnected from your own needs? When you take the time to grow, to heal, to reflect, and to get clear on what matters, you don't just benefit yourself. You benefit everyone around you. Because now, you're not giving from a place of emptiness. You're giving from abundance. You're not reacting to life, you're responding with wisdom. You're not just surviving your days, you're adding value to them for yourself and for others. Your best self doesn't need to be loud, flashy, or flawless. It just needs to be real. Real is powerful. Real inspires. Real invites others to be themselves too. When people see someone walking in integrity with self-respect and inner peace, they don't just admire it, they feel it. And often it gives them the courage to look inward and rise higher themselves. Being your best self also means taking responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your energy, your growth, and your mindset. It means recognizing that you always have a choice to evolve, to show up with intention, and to lead by example. You don't have to be perfect to be impactful. You just have to be present, committed, and willing to do the inner work. Think about the people who have influenced your life the most, the ones who inspired you, challenged you, or helped you grow. Chances are, it wasn't just their words or accomplishments. It was who they were, the way they carried themselves, the way they made you feel. the way they lived in alignment with something deeper. That's the gift they gave you, the gift of their best self. So if you want to serve, if you want to lead, if you want to love deeply, start with you. Become someone who operates from wholeness, not obligation. Someone who gives from fullness, not emptiness. Because when you're at your best, everyone around you benefits. You are the foundation of every relationship you're in, every project you lead, every life you touch. The stronger, clearer, and more grounded you are, the more impact you create. And that's why your best self is the best gift, not just for you, but for the world.